Hello, and welcome to the Pit Pony podcast with myself, Sharon Cawley,
and me, Sarah Dunwood,
in which we talk to teachers from all walks of life who exited the classroom from what they thought was a job for life and thrived on the other side of teaching. Coming up in this episode...
So, up to about just over 2 years ago, I was the deputy head. I was so happy. I loved my job. I was passionate. I threw every hour I possibly could into it. I'd trained Senkos. I'd done training and you name it. I just loved it. I loved having an impact on the staff and the children and the families.
Hello, and welcome to another brilliant episode of the Pit Pony podcast. An ordinary pit pony who found herself in life after teaching and is going to share her thrival story with us. We've got Rowena Hicks. Brilliant. Really pleased to have Rowena here with us today. She did 30 years in the classroom, and a really extensive role, as you can imagine, over that period of time. Deputy head teacher, has a master's, a deputy head teacher, Senko, lead teacher based in the London, Kent area, primary maths, PE, SEND, all of them, as you would expect over 3 decades. Definitely a lifer. Without a doubt, Rowena was in it for life. She knew nothing else. True pit pony, by the way. Absolute true pit pony. But came out at the age of 54. Not planned, not expected. 54 goes, I'm out from my job for life. Welcome, Rowena. What are you doing today? What's your job?
Hi, Sharon. It's great to be here. So now, mostly, I'm an author.
Excellent. Which is something we all have on our bucket list, to be able to say, I am an author. And not just randomly, teach, flourish and thrive. We're just really going to enjoy picking apart what you're doing now. But what we do with our guests, we take them right back to the circumstances in which they left. And what a story this is. So welcome, Rowena, and I'm going to ask you to start where you finished.
So up to about just over 2 years ago, I was the deputy head. I was so happy. I loved my job. I was passionate. I threw every hour I possibly could into it. I'd trained Senkos. I'd done training and you name it. I just loved it. I loved having an impact on the staff and the children and the families. And I started having some warning signs of odd feelings in my body and my bones and headaches and sleeplessness and getting a bit crotchety at home. And my children started asking me if I was okay and perhaps I should change my job because I wasn't having much time with them, basically. And I started going to see the doctor, who was a bit concerned. And then one morning, I ended up in an ambulance going to A&E with chest pain and took a couple of weeks off. And they said, no, it wasn't a heart attack. No one told me anything about anything. So I just went straight back full in. And then a little bit later, the chest pains got very seriously worse. And I lost feeling in my arms. I lost vision in one eye. I wasn't sleeping. I was eating takeaways, all the usual stuff. And I went to see the doctor and he said, Rowena, we've done all these tests and really it's actually got to a point where you could die if you don't stop doing what you're doing.
Wow. So physically, medically, there's nothing wrong with you apart from one thing, your job.
Yeah, I've been tested. I'm fit as an ox. They tested everything.
Did you go, okay, doctor, I'll resign?
No.
Okay, I didn't think you were going to say that one bit. So what did you do?
Oh, I fought really hard. And then eventually he really did say, look, this is a wake-up call here. And so I went to speak to my boss and a couple of others at school and HR and, and they all were saying, oh, Ro, just take a break and you'll be fine. We want you to come back. I knew I was good at it. I loved it. And I was making a difference. But actually, It was when the doctor said to me, you need to hear what I'm saying here. You are at serious risk now. And that's what it took to make me say, okay. But the guilt and the shame and the horror of letting my team down was appalling.
You say at one point there was a time you remember you were sitting in your car and you could not get out of your car. What did you mean by that? You couldn't physically get out of your car?
So I followed my morning routine that day. I remember it crystal clear. And I got myself into the car, drove to work. And I remember even what parking slot I was in. I was so early. I was always one of the first in. And I was looking at the front door and I was in floods of tears. I didn't know what to do. I could not get my body to move to get out of that car. And I know that's not unheard of with overwhelm, burnout, stress, anxiety. You know, I've heard other teachers who've had that, but I had never thought it would happen to me. I thought I was invincible because I was helping everybody else, wasn't I? So it wasn't going to happen to me until that day.
And this is where we go to this wonderful expression that we use all the time. And if we're not careful, it's going to become a label that we put on people, particularly teachers, that we throw out there, you know, like the word legend and icon, and we devalue them over a period of time where somebody brings you a cup of tea and you go, you legend. No, you're not. And one of the words and labels that we're overusing at the moment, but I listen to them all the time, is the expression people pleaser.
Oh, yeah.
Teachers tend to fall into that category of people pleasing. Now, would you say you were a people pleaser?
I'd like to say I was a people pleaser because I'm working very, very hard to break that off me. But it's not just the people pleasing, because there's a need for affirmation in a lot of us because we don't feel good enough. And we feel that we're going to be caught out, you know, as a Senko for however many years. And even I used to train Senkos on their NASCO course, going back into work. And I used to think, oh no, I don't know the answer to that. I've got to look like I do. And actually teachers say exactly the same, that they feel they're going to be found out because of this over-conscientiousness, this inability to show any weakness or vulnerability. And unfortunately, it's incredibly common. Yes.
Because people pleasers, if we work around this a bit, Sarah, because we spend a lot of time dealing with members from the Life After Teaching group who do this. They put their own needs so far down the list of significance in order to avoid conflict, keep everybody okay, make sure, and obviously it's rooted in childhood and patterns of behaviour from the kind of like the family dynamic possibly in which they were raised. A people pleaser has no boundaries. And it comes down to that image, when the plane's crashing and you sat next to your kids and the masks drop down and you say, whose masks do you put on first? I'll put my kids on. No, you don't. You put your own mask on first, otherwise you can't help your kids. So from what you've described, because we are pit ponies with the work ethic of the pit pony, we just keep going and going and going. Sarah Dunwood, you over the last 3 years, you have worked really hard on healthy boundaries. Do you recognise yourself, particularly somebody as a Senko, were you a people pleaser?
Yeah, and I think what I really recognise is that need for affirmation and that constant imposter syndrome, particularly if you can't pull the answer to something in that split second where somebody asks you. And I think that massively undermines your own confidence, and then you do more to keep going.
Can I step in there? Because I think this lack of confidence is enormous. And actually, a teacher said to me this week that they got outstanding observations from all of the SLT in their school, and yet they still didn't feel good enough. And I don't know what it is about school staff, but our confidence is shot. And one of the things that I've looked into, particularly for me and the book I wrote and things, is around, I know when I started a new school and I felt very uncomfortable with some of the values and some of the things I was being asked to do and the approach they were taking. But because I was then sort of locked in, I had to adjust myself to fit in with them. And that is an incredibly stressful place to be when your values don't align with the places that you work, or with your boss, your team, might even be some of your teammates. But actually, it's looking at whether your values align as well, because otherwise that can lead to a lot of stress.
And it's the ethos, isn't it? People don't say no in teaching. I talk about different generations as well, because we're Generation X. So our work ethic was give me more, give me more, give me more. I'm strong. That's how I was raised. Taking time off is a weakness. The proudest thing my dad had when he retired from the prison service in about 1996, he had a 100% attendance record. So I watched a man go into work with broken ribs. I watched a man leave my mum ill, 3 of them all being sick and poorly, and he went into work because that's what you did. That was considered successful, putting your own needs completely at the detriment of yourself.
Absolutely. And look at us as teachers. If we need to take a day off or a week off or, God forbid, longer, the guilt and the appalling sense of letting your team down, which then means you can't heal because we have this extraordinary view of ourselves as indispensable.
Yes. It's a weird one, isn't it? It's a swing between imposter syndrome, I'm not good enough, but also I'm completely indispensable and the whole thing will go to hell in a handcart if I'm not there. Well, yeah. Which is it? Which is it? So you're in this position at the age of 54. You're in a physically, when somebody talks about pains in their arms, they've lost their eyesight, pains in the chest, pins and needles, this is not great. But somebody who's been a people pleaser all of their life, I suspect also you had really tethered a great sense of your identity to being a teacher. So you go, your resignation is accepted. And what tends to be the case at this stage is there is a really dark interim period before the fight back. And Sarah, you will chip in here now. You had, what do you refer to it as, that period in your life when you were in this holding space?
The Netflix, crisps and sofa phase, because I didn't move from the sofa, literally for hours sometimes, because it was almost physically, the mental pain in terms of feeling so lost and discombobulated translated into this physical inertia. It was like I just can't do anything. It was debilitating.
Did you experience anything like that, Rowena?
Well, this is where I'm a bit different, I think, because the people pleaser in me and the reaction to people seeing me as a failure or feeling or sort of, I'm not sure anyone told me I was weak, but some people around me said, oh, that's a weakness to crash out of work like that. And so the response in me was this desperate sort of emptiness, if you like, and isolation. But yeah, at the same time, I needed to be doing something to prove to people that I still had some worth and that actually I wasn't a complete loser and I still mattered to somebody or something. So I straight away had to start something to prove that.
Isn't it interesting that they're both trauma responses?
Yeah.
Both trauma responses. So therefore, it's okay. Either one of those. And I think that's what happens when we hemorrhage out and we come out. Because we've lost all our islands of safety, the structure, the half terms. What's also been lost is being led by bells. We're told when we can go to the toilet. We're told what schemes of work we have to do, when our lesson observations are. We get a calendar that we sort of like do a hybrid of what's the kids' school calendar, my school calendar, and told where to be when, my weekends and my time off. We've talked about this institutionalization of pit ponies and educational pit ponies. Yeah. So actually, when that all stops, it is absolutely possible to do both, to sit on the settee and go, I cannot move, or to keep going and keep going and keep going. I've got to do this because it's not what we expected. At 54, that's absolutely not what you had planned. There's no way that's in your life plan.
Oh, gosh, no. I was so happy. I was loving what I was doing, and I was looking at what was next and all sorts of options for me. Totally. So it was completely sideswiped.
So you start... What's your financial circumstances at this point? Do you need to be earning? Do you have to work? Where are you at financially?
I was lucky because I'd received some inheritance, so I lived from that mostly. I also at that time had a husband, which I no longer have.
Hello, caller. We can all relate to that.
Helped a little bit, but now I don't.
So you start with, you felt isolated from your friends to a certain extent. Yeah. Especially if most of them in your phone have been teachers. You told me that you felt depression had hit. And you're going out walking with the dog kind of thing, which dogs, I've got to be honest, animals are our salvations when we're at our lowest points.
Oh, huge. I mean, my daily walk with the dog probably held me together along with the antidepressants. And I'm quite open about the fact I have antidepressants because do you know what? I see it as a sign of strength that I am doing my absolute best to get myself better. And I started therapy.
Right, perfect. And Sarah can chime in again. There's such commonalities. The first thing you did, the doctor looked at the state of you, and what did the doctor prescribe for you, Sarah?
Put me on stronger antidepressants than I'd been on previously. And then I think we're mirroring each other so much in terms of experience that I invested a lot of money that I didn't have at the time in talking therapy and coaching to unpick all of that hurt. And I felt like I'd been cut adrift. And even though I had really supportive family and all the rest of it around me, I had no sense of my own identity anymore, and I had to come to that. And I think what therapy really helped with me is that actually my identity wasn't a teacher, got me back to who I really was.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. So, Rowena, you did CBT, did you? Is that what?
I did. So the NHS gave me 6 sessions of CBT because of all the training I'd had at school. I ended up helping everybody in the group who was in such a terrible state because I had way more experience than the lovely people who were leading it and following a script, really. But one-to-one therapy was better for me, the counselling.
So we go back then to you've come out of this. You go into your therapy. What moves you to the area you're in now? What takes you from the teacher to somebody who's walking the dog, who's accessing therapists? Where do you then start to pull things together in the terms of teach, flourish and thrive?
Okay, well, that's quite simple, really, because it was a connection of 2 things. One was someone saying to me, why do you think anyone wants to listen to your opinion, Rowena? And that made me sit up and think, whoa, hold on a minute. Am I even valid anymore? I don't have a job. I don't have a title. I don't have an income. Do I have any value as me? But God downloaded, I don't know if there are Christians listening here, but God downloaded to me. I was on a Christian conference and he, just in a moment of quiet, he downloaded, he said, value yourself, Rowena, then you can value your team. And then I had 7 comments after that, which looked like 7 chapters of a book. So I then decided that it was time for me to look at where my value comes from, which is not affirmation from everyone else. It is intrinsically, I have value because of who I am, and as do each one of us. And actually, all the research shows as well that until we really value ourselves, we can't value those around us. And we can't. So what I was doing in school, I was giving out and valuing everybody, the children, the parents, the staff. It was my passion to be supporting everybody. Because I didn't recognize I needed to value and look after myself, I then crouched and I wasn't as effective in doing what I was trying to do. So I put it into a book. I had a lot of fun writing the book.
Brilliant. And we will get into that a bit more now. And I think it took me probably hemorrhaged out at the age of 41, went into survival mode because the kids were really young. But it was only coming out to the latter part of my 40s and my early 50s that I suddenly realised once you know your self-worth, you will never, ever allow anybody to make you feel the way you used to do. Now, finding your self-worth isn't something that happens overnight. No. And when I had to go on a quest, and I always use the word quest, not journey, because we're not Americans, right? You know, we're very much 13th century. We're on a quest, right? Okay. I suddenly went on a quest to find how I find value in myself, how I put a price on what I bring to others. And very often the most valuable commodity we have is our time. Yeah. How am I spending my time? And we link this very easily to the word self-care. And if we're not careful, people tinker around the edges with self-care, with face packs and nail extensions, and they think they've gone for a swim. What I did was I used the power of my phone to start learning and educating myself and watching TED Talks and signing up to 5-day challenges. And I repositioned myself in my worldview as somebody with value. And it's only when you can do that do you truly bring value to the people around you, because you've got it sorted first with you. Absolutely. It's not easy. It's not easy.
And it really isn't easy. And I think the message I would be saying to people here is if you're resonating with any of this, it actually takes some hard work and some daily, consistent habit changes and mindset changes. And actually, funnily enough, that's why I've just written my second book, which comes out in November, which is called The Burnout Busting Teacher's Journal, because it's daily, tiny, weeny habit changes and mindset changes. Because, you know, look at what's in your thought life. You know, our time, I agree, is our greatest commodity. But actually, if you don't take control of your thoughts, they're going to impact your actions. And, you know, I've been out of teaching 2 and a bit years now, and I still fight that people-pleasing sort of drive in me. I'm having still to work. I teach on it. I'm still learning and working on it. These take time.
Of course they do. Of course they do, because we're rewiring our brain after God knows how many decades of limiting self-belief.
Yeah.
How we respond to things, a gut response, going into panic, going into guilt. I love the book, The Chimp Paradox. Sarah Dunn threw that one my way a couple of years ago when I still couldn't get things sorted. But you mentioned something there. You talked about journaling. Now, where journaling's concerned, I'm going to talk about that the same way I talked about people-pleasing. Okay? If we're not careful, again, it's going to become a misused, misunderstood, diluted, powerful thing that we can do. Journaling, it's not the Diary of Anne Frank. It's not just writing things. Journaling is a very, very specific skill, and it's a very specific therapeutic tool we can use. Imagine for a moment, Rowena, people don't know about journaling. Start us with the idiot's guide to what is the therapeutic tool of journaling.
Okay, well, there's lots of types of journaling, and everyone's got to find what fits for them. So I started years and years ago in the morning and in the evening, just talking to myself in my journal about where I'd been that day and trying to recognize my thinking and what was annoying me and sitting with me and all that sort of thing. And then I started a bit of guided journaling. So this gives you prompts, and this is where I found real impact, because we don't have a lot of time as teachers. So you need something short and to the point. And actually, things like, what helps me is things like, how can I start my day with 3 things or 3 people that I'm grateful for? Because it immediately shifts your thinking. And if you're thinking, oh, I can't get out of bed, how am I going to do it today? You're thinking, actually, I've got 4 amazing children. I've got a warm bed, and I know I can get out of work at 5 o'clock today. So you can shift your thinking, or it might say something like, what is the worst job on my to-do list that I could do first today? So it's giving you some clues as to how to have a successful day. And it's the guided sense of it. But in my journal, I also give quotes and research and that sort of thing to empower teachers to remember that if you're not looking after you, so for example, the research shows that if we don't take regular, even tiny breaks, then we're not as productive. In fact, it can impact us 40%. So even taking a 5-minute lunch break and 2 minutes between classes or whenever you've got a gap, even that can increase your productivity. And yet we don't do it because we think we can't, but actually we really can if we're determined enough.
And that leans in to the Netflix crisps and sofa. There's no way I could have burst through Sarah's doors in 2019 or whatever year it was and gone, come on, we've got this, kid. You need those first, even if I'm just doing this, it's enough.
And I think it's really interesting because there's a post in our group right the way back from early doors that I'd started making a list every day of 3 things that I was grateful for about not being in teaching anymore. And the list is ridiculous. When I look at it now, things like being able to go to the toilet when I wanted to, being able to drink a full cup of tea, they're so low level, but actually they're so intrinsically important to being able to be healthy and well. So I recognize that completely because that massively helped me, that when I had a wobble of maybe I should just go back into teaching, I would look at that list and go, no, this is what you are grateful for now.
I would say that I gave an assistant head, a really outstanding teacher, the week that it's really good for the first week of term from my journal to trial it before it comes out to give me some feedback. And she said, oh, Ro, I don't know what to do because I don't think I've got 30 seconds at the start and the end of the day to look at your journal. And I am so shocked at myself. And she was in an absolute oh, no, this revelation. So she said, right, I'm going to change my day. So she just put in 30 seconds. And actually what came up in her day was the prompt was, she had a very, very challenging year 3 class. And she said the prompt was, what does my class need the most today? Or what do I need to offer them today the most? Something like that. And she sort of thought about this. And it was probably 10, 15 seconds. And she said, I just want them to be happy because they were quite unruly, start of term, difficult. And she said, all I did all of that day and the rest of the week was try to make them happy. She said, we had the most amazing week. It just changed my thinking. But that was 15 seconds at the start of the day of her reflecting, because as teachers, we don't stop to reflect.
We don't have a toolkit.
No.
I speak to so many teachers in crisis and they're in the grip of anxiety. That's the main. It's not the depression. They've not gone into that sedentary, defeated. There's normally been a critical incident that they're responding to, support plan or suspension or something's happened and it's anxiety. And I'll say to them, right, what's your toolkit? What do you do for your mental health?
Yeah.
Clueless. They start to make things up. The first thing they'll say is, well, I like to go for walks. That ain't a toolkit. That's a given. What is your toolkit? And teachers do not have it for their mental health.
We need to have this in teacher training, really, a toolkit for school staff, because actually once your brain gets to that place where you're in that level of anxiety and fight, flight, your brain is so fizzy, and teachers have described it. Well, I can describe it about myself. I couldn't think. I couldn't make a decision. That was one of my biggest problems. I couldn't even make a decision to stop my job because by that point I was well gone. And so I was listening to these opinions of everybody else, and I lost sight of what was best for me and my children. And a toolkit is absolutely critical to put it together, but to put it together gently and for ourselves and in a way that suits us and serves us, rather than a big whoosh of, oh, I've got to change all of this in the next week. That's not going to work.
But imagine if it was school culture.
Oh, yes.
Imagine if it was the culture within a school where you were almost at the point where going, I've got to take my 5 minutes journaling time, because if I don't, my head's not going to be happy with me. Mm-hmm. If I don't take this time out for myself now, this isn't who we are as a school. Because what they do is they cram stuff like this into an inset day on the 6th of September, tick the box that they've done it, but then they don't embed it. So you have a journal, okay, that you have produced. Now, I'm just going to walk you back a step now. As an English teacher, you said to me I'm an author. Well, I'll tell you now, in a full and frank disclosure, I'm always jealous of people who've written a book, because that should have been me, right? So as pleased as I am for you, the green-eyed monster kicks in. And now you're talking about publishing a journal. Just imagine for a minute, somebody's listening to this and they want to publish a book. How do you actually go about taking ideas from your head and publishing a book in the 21st century? Give us some golden nuggets.
That's a great question. So I just started blurbing out stories, really, and some of the key tips that I think one of the main reasons I wrote it, actually, well, A, it was for me, for therapy probably, but B, I wanted to impact someone like a teaching assistant I spoke to one day in the year before I left. And I went and said to her, Julie, what is the thing that I do that helps you the most? And she said, oh, it's easy to answer that, Ro. She said, it's when you come round in the morning and you say, how are you? And I said, well, everyone does that, don't they? She said, no, people want to know, how's your work going? And are you on top of your work? And what's going well in the classroom? And she said, Ro, you asked, how am I? So what I wanted to do is share stories like that to try and impact leaders and other school staff to remember to look after each other, not just to look after yourself. Because actually, in giving out to others, you feed yourself. So I started writing stories, and then I got a little bit lost. So I went online and found a company. I don't know if you want me to say the company name on here, Punchy Books. And this guy does a course on how to write a book, and he gives all the sort of criteria. I have to say, it was useful, bits of it. But what was really useful is I met another lady who was doing the same course, and we sort of slightly got a bit lost in the course and pushed it aside. But every week we would meet for an hour on Zoom, and we'd say, right, I've read your chapter 1. This is the feedback. I've read your chapter 2. This is the feedback. So we wrote our books together. So if you can find someone to write with, and I'm thinking of writing another book, so if anyone wants to join up, we could certainly do that. Maybe we have a Leave the Classroom and Thrive author group. That'd be so fun, because it is really empowering to write. And actually, you know, I know there's lots of teachers out there who've got amazing ideas and lots of novels in their brains, but it is about sitting down and being really structured. And the best advice I was ever given was go, if possible, same time every day, let's say for an hour or two, put the same music, calm music on, get the same mug with the same drink, and your brain after a while clicks in to the idea that, oh, it's writing time now. Really helpful.
Wow. Accountability partner. Perfect. Yeah. We all like that. And that would possibly work, Sarah, within the ND community for body doubling if what was it? body doubling is very, very important, isn't it? What is that exactly?
So it's the idea that if I take myself right the way back, that I can't work in a completely silent environment if there's no one there. I can work in a silent environment if there's somebody physically there that I don't engage with. So I would used to take myself off to a coffee shop, put my noise cancelling earphones in so I couldn't hear anything, but there were other people around which just kind of allowed me to focus, to force them out of my... It's a very weird thing to explain, but it's just having the presence of somebody else. So I've done it on Zoom with people that we just have our cameras on, we're muted, we're getting on with our own thing, but just having that person there kind of helps with focus. I don't know how to explain it any better than that.
Oh, that was perfect. So you've got the accountability partner. How'd you publish it? How'd you get it published?
Well, I self-publish on Amazon because it's cheap. Well, it's free, actually. And one of my kids, well, after most of them help edit and all that sort of thing, one of them put it into design and put it onto Amazon for me. Because that's a little bit technical. I'm a bit old to learn it. I could learn it.
Yeah, but why have a dog and bark yourself when you've got kids? Ellie, upload this onto TikTok. So that's great, because you've clearly done the work. You've clearly started to dip into the toolkit that we need. And toolkits are different. I always refer to them as, because I talk about swim lanes in life, and I have like a box of rubber rings and armbands and floats, and because mental health, there isn't an outcome to the journey, which is why I don't like the word journey, because it suggests a destination. Actually, I am still using the same mental health toolkit I was using for when I started my fight back to when I'm in my thrival mode, because we don't just plateau. It's like weight gain. You don't reach your target weight that you've, right, well, I've got out of control, I'm not going to get any bigger. It's an ongoing thing with our mental health, and it's so important. So when I talk to a teacher and they're in crisis and they say, well, I go out for walks, I want to hear, I do guided meditation, I go out for walks, I journal, I pray. There's a whole host of things we can be doing at different times in our lives. And that's where robust mental health comes from. And that's self-care. And that's talking to yourself with compassion.
Yeah, but as you say, it's finding what works for you at the time. And actually, for me, different things have worked at different times. And actually, with a teacher in Israel, I am just designing an anti-stress toolkit for teachers, which has lots of these ideas. It has apps in it, 'cause there's lots of free apps out there as well. And different things really support, because what helps her doesn't help me. You know, we are so different, aren't we? And everybody just needs to try different things. But it does take a little bit of proactive, intentional action.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. 100%. So, my friend, love this. Love everything about your story. How you were so honest at the beginning by being the people pleaser, who, even though the doctor was basically saying, leave or you will kill yourself, it still left you in a dilemma. And then you've talked with such eloquence and understanding about your own experiences. There's no full stop. You're a published author. So now, by the way, that squeak you heard, listeners, we've not hurt somebody. I've had to sit and watch a tabby keep going back and two across your screen. And when finally the tabby cat was dumped on the floor, sorry. And that I'll come back to any day of the week. Get an animal. Get an animal. So, fantastic story. So how we're going to end it with our guests is this. We ask them the sliding doors question. Rowena, what's your sliding doors moment in life?
It's so easy for me, that really, because last June I put myself on a plane to go and visit my son in Bali. And I sat on this semi-empty plane in term time, going to somewhere hot just because I wanted to and I could. And I realized that actually I'd taken some control in my life and that I was going to be okay. I wasn't completely better, but actually I could start to look at myself with value in terms of making a decision for myself, not just what everybody else wanted of me. It was a beautiful moment of realization.
And that was a beautiful, beautiful thing, particularly as two mothers of sons. Sarah, there is no greater love of your life than your son. I don't care what you say. Daughters, we clash. Like, no, we're not even speaking now, right? We'll be speaking by tea time. But the relationship with a mother and son is just powerful. And thank you for what was a glorious Pit Pony episode. There's so much there for our listeners. We are going to drop links to everything you do, who you are, how people can connect with you. Because just listening to you, I can imagine you going around that school, and when you asked Julie how she was, how are you? I felt that energy come through. What a lovely, lovely person you are. And from Sarah and myself and all of our listeners, thank you so much for giving us your time today.
Thank you.
What a beautiful soul, wasn't she?
Yeah. The so much resonated for me. Parallels, and obviously different experience, but similar in terms of the other side. There's a couple of things, and parallels for me as well in terms of neurodivergence and some of the steps that are about recovering in terms of mental health are actually really helpful in terms of managing neurodivergence. And I'm coming at this from a personal perspective, but it made me giggle a little bit. I was obviously muted when she talked about fizzy brain, when you haven't got enough time to think about things, because I've said that to you before now, haven't I, that I sometimes get to a point where my brain feels like it's fizzing and I cannot process anything at all at that point. One of the things that I do want to mention, she used the phrase eat the frog. Well, she didn't use the phrase eat the frog. She talked about doing the task that is the worst thing on your list for the day. Mm-hmm. And it led me to that Mark Twain quote, which is that if you eat a frog as the first thing that you do in the day, that will probably be the worst thing that you do in the day. And there's lots of studies about that, and there's books been written about it in terms of when you're struggling with your day, take the thing that's worst and actually get it off your plate and then go. So I thought that was really interesting. But what just genuinely the route into authorship I thought was just lovely. Some real golden nuggets there, because there's lots of people who've got a book in them for sure.
Yeah.
But I think what will stay with me about Rowena's story is her doctor telling her that if she did not stop, she would die.
Yeah, I agree. And that you've just said about the frog, if you remember, our accountant, Phil Wellesby, first threw that in with me. And I didn't say it at the time, but it was peak irony, because actually eating the frog was spending time with my accountant. So it was peak irony that was the one thing I had to get out the way. But a quick one I do, and it's similar to an eat the frog, I changed the word from have to get. Oh, I have to pick the kids up. I get to pick the kids up. I have to do this paperwork. I get to do this. And I think that toolkit will come to the fore more and more, because that's when our pit ponies, when they land and splat in that field, 9 times out of 10, the people I talk to have not adapted that within the classroom. And I always have that moment of, I wonder if I'd have stayed, if I'd have had those boundaries, if I'd have had my toolkit at the time, would I have remained a healthier teacher? I don't know. And that's what I'm never going to navel gaze over. But we lose sight of what we can say yes to and what we don't have to say yes to. But when you've lost your value, she had no value on herself despite the fact she knew what she was doing was invaluable, she couldn't make that connection. I just loved her. I liked how she talked. I spent a lot of time pre-recording talking to Rowena. She's a good soul. She's a really, really good soul who's now in the right place. Journaling. Everything she talked about those small steps, what you can be doing. And I almost could have predicted when she gave it to the head teacher to trial what the head teacher's response was going to be. I've not got time to do that. Yeah, and if you're answering that question with I haven't got time, stop. You are absolutely the very person who should be making time, because on a different note, we have said goodbye to parents. We have said goodbye to people who've come to the end of their time. And my dad was 75, my mum was 82. Roy, 83? Was Roy?
80. Oh gosh, I'm going to get this wrong now. 85 or 86?
80.
He was 85, he was just due his 86th birthday this year.
You go and speak to somebody who's retired and ask them what they wish they could change. It's about that time and getting it back.
Yeah.
Especially now retirement age is getting a lot later. Now's the time.
Yeah.
Especially if you're in your summer or your autumn period of your life, you'll never get the time back. Last night, I had to go and pick my daughter up. It's 11 o'clock at night. She'd been to some Halloween dairy Farmageddon type thing. I get to do that because do you know what? I ain't going to be doing that in 5 years' time.
And that's exactly it. Gig with my son on Friday, who is driving now. He could have met me in Manchester, but I chose to go and pick him up so that actually I could have the drive with him both ways, because it's quality time.
Because I've missed too many sports days. I was at parents' evenings at my own school, talking to other people's kids, because why Warrington schools did that, I'll never know. And then I was doing a 10-minute catch-up on the phone about my own kids' education. And I used to live with regret about the moments that I've missed and the moments I was there for but wasn't present.
Yeah.
How long's this school play going to last? Well, what time are you actually on, Ellie? Because do I have to sit through the first half hour of other people's drivel? That's not how it should be. You know, other people's very talented children performing in school plays. What made me phrase that? There's only so many versions of the nativity you can do when your kid's got one line at the end. So I think she was really, really great. And I think a very thought-provoking, reflective episode that we have, and wonderful to have. So, Sarah, from me, sending much love to you, and I'll see you on the other side, my friend.
Tra.
Thank you, as always, for listening to our Pit Pony podcast. On behalf of Sarah, our guests, and all involved with the production, we're so grateful for your support. Please subscribe to our channels, follow us on social media, and we look forward to seeing you next time when we will have another inspirational story from a fellow pit pony who has exited the classroom and thrived.